The moment Ethan looked up, the room changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. No music stopped. No one gasped. But something invisible shifted, like the air tightening before a storm. His eyes found Lily across the room, and for a second, he forgot where he was, who he was with, and what that look might cost him. Across the table, Sarah noticed. She didn't react right away. She had learned over years of marriage how to stay calm in public, how to smile when something felt off, how to read the smallest changes in the man she loved. And this was not small. They were in a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle, gathered in Mark's house for a relaxed summer dinner. It was meant to be easy. Old friends, familiar laughter, warm lights, and open windows letting in cool evening air. The kind of night couples enjoyed because it felt safe and predictable. Sarah had been looking forward to it. She and Ethan had flown in from Toronto 2 days earlier. The trip was supposed to help them reconnect. Work had been heavy. Life had felt rushed. This visit, she hoped, would slow things down. Instead, it sped something up. Lily arrived late. She stood at the doorway for a brief moment, holding a small gift bag, apologizing with a soft laugh. She wasn't trying to stand out. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, her posture careful. Like someone who didn't want to take up too much space. Ethan noticed her immediately. He told himself it was nothing. Just curiosity. She was new, that was all. Mark introduced her as a coworker who had recently moved back to the area. Someone rebuilding life after a difficult chapter. Ethan nodded politely, smiled, went back to his drink. Then he looked again. And again. Sarah caught the second look. Then the third. Not obvious enough for anyone else to call it out, but enough for her. She saw how his attention shifted when Lily spoke, how his face softened, how his body leaned slightly forward as if pulled by interest he hadn't planned. Sarah's stomach tightened. She reminded herself not to overthink. Ethan had always been kind. He listened to people. That was one of the reasons she loved him. But this felt different. There was a quiet intensity in his focus that she hadn't seen in a long time. Conversation flowed around the table. Stories, jokes, memories. Sarah answered when spoken to, laughed at the right moments, but her mind stayed alert. She watched Ethan more than anyone else. When Lily laughed, Ethan smiled. When Lily spoke about starting over, Ethan listened closely. When Lily looked unsure, Ethan nodded as if he understood her completely. Sarah felt invisible. She tried to pull him back into their space. She touched his arm once while making a comment. He smiled at her, but his eyes drifted back moments later. That hurt more than she expected. Sarah had always trusted Ethan. They had weathered hard moments together. They weren't perfect, but they were solid. Or so she thought. Tonight made her question how solid things really were. Across the table, Lily sensed something too. She wasn't blind. She noticed Ethan's attention. It made her uncomfortable, not flattered. She had promised herself she wouldn't step into anything complicated again. She had come to this dinner hoping for normal conversation, not tension. And then Lily saw Sarah watching. Their eyes met briefly. Just a second. But in that second, Lily understood. She looked away quickly, her chest tightening. She hadn't done anything wrong, but she felt like she was standing in the middle of something fragile. Dinner ended slowly. Plates were cleared. People moved around the room. Some stepped outside to enjoy the night air. Sarah stood and excused herself quietly. She needed space. Outside, the porch was cool and calm. Street lights glowed softly. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She didn't want to cry. Not here, not now. Footsteps approached. "I hope I'm not bothering you," Lily said gently. Sarah turned. Lily stood a respectful distance away, hands clasped in front of her. There was no confidence in her posture, only care. "No," Sarah said. "I just needed air." They stood in silence for a moment. It wasn't awkward, just heavy. "I get overwhelmed in groups too," Lily said. "Especially lately." Sarah nodded. "Travel does that to me." Lily hesitated, then spoke again. I hope I didn't make things strange tonight." Sarah looked at her, surprised by the honesty. She studied Lily's face and saw no intention, no pride. Just uncertainty. "You didn't," Sarah said truthfully. "You really didn't." Lily exhaled, relieved. "I'm glad." Inside the house, Ethan looked toward the porch. He saw the two women standing there, talking quietly. A strange feeling settled in his chest. He didn't know why, but it felt like he was watching something important happen without him. When Sarah and Lily came back inside, things felt different. Softer, but more distant. Sarah stayed closer to herself. Lily spoke less. Ethan noticed Sarah's quiet. He wanted to ask what was wrong, but didn't. He told himself he would later. The night ended with polite goodbyes, hugs, promises to meet again. Lily left early, thanking everyone. Her smile, tired but kind. As she walked to her car, she felt a mix of relief and sadness. She hadn't expected to feel connected to anyone that night. She hadn't expected to feel seen by another woman's pain. Inside, Sarah helped gather coats. Ethan stood nearby, watching her, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Guilt, maybe, confusion, fear. The drive back was quiet. City lights passed by. The radio played softly, unnoticed. Sarah looked out the window, her reflection faint against the glass. "You're quiet," Ethan said finally. "So are you," she replied. He nodded, unsure what to say next. Sarah wanted to speak. She wanted to tell him what she saw, how it made her feel, how something small had shaken her sense of safety. But she didn't want to accuse. Not yet. They reached the hotel. The elevator ride was silent. The room felt unfamiliar, even though they had slept there the night before. Sarah stood by the window, arms crossed lightly, as if holding herself together. "I felt something tonight," she said softly. Ethan froze. "Something bad." "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but it scared me." He turned to her, his face serious. "I never meant to hurt you." She said, "That's why this is hard." He wanted to explain. To say it was nothing. To promise it would never happen again. But the truth was messy, and he didn't have the words yet. They went to bed with space between them. In the dark, Ethan stared at the ceiling, replaying the evening. The looks. The silence. The way Sarah's voice had changed. At the same time, across the city, Lily sat alone in her apartment, wondering why one dinner had left her feeling so unsettled. And Sarah lay awake beside her husband, realizing something she had never had to face before. Sometimes the most dangerous moments don't come with loud arguments or broken trust. Sometimes they arrive quietly, with a look, and once that look is seen, nothing feels the same again. The morning light was harsh, cutting through the hotel curtains, but it felt like it illuminated more than just the room. Sarah opened her eyes and saw Ethan already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, staring at nothing. The silence between them wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. Full of unsaid words that pressed down like bricks. Ethan had been thinking all night. Every glance, every smile, every small movement at dinner replayed in his mind. He didn't understand why he had been drawn to Lily. It wasn't about wanting her, he told himself. It wasn't about love. But there was something in the way she moved, the way she listened, that made him forget the world for a moment. And that scared him more than he wanted to admit. Sarah finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "You were distracted last night." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "At dinner," she said, keeping her eyes on him. "You weren't present. Your mind kept drifting. You kept looking at her." She didn't name Lily directly, but it didn't matter. Ethan already knew. He swallowed hard, trying to find an answer that wouldn't hurt her. I didn't mean to," he said finally. "I don't even know why it happened." Sarah nodded slowly, her fingers gripping the edge of the bedsheet. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was hurt, and that hurt was deeper than anger. It made her question the solidity of everything they had built together, the shared routines. The quiet mornings, the life that had felt safe and predictable. They stayed like that for a few moments. The weight of the night pressing in. Ethan wanted to reach for her, to hold her hand, but he wasn't sure she wanted that touch. He couldn't tell if he was welcome or if it would push her further away. Finally, Sarah stood near the window, her arms wrapped lightly around herself. "I don't want distance between us," she said softly, almost as if she were talking to herself. "But I feel it." Ethan's chest tightened. He knew she was right. The distance had been growing for months, slow but steady, unnoticed until now. He wanted to tell her he loved her, that she was the one he wanted, that everything else was meaningless. But he didn't know how to say it without sounding weak, without making it seem like he was defending himself. "I don't want to lose what we have," he admitted, his voice low. "I didn't mean anything by it. It just happened." Sarah turned to face him. Her eyes searched his, trying to find the truth buried in the hesitation and pauses. "But it did happen," she said. Her words weren't accusing. They were simple, honest, and that honesty was harder to bear than anger would have been the night before. It had already planted seeds of doubt. But now in the quiet morning light, Sarah realized that the problem wasn't just a look or a fleeting moment of distraction. The problem was the cracks in the foundation they had been ignoring, the silent distance, the unspoken frustrations, the moments where they had stopped truly noticing each other. Ethan moved closer, hesitant, but Sarah didn't reach for him. She stayed in her corner by the window, watching the city below. She wanted reassurance, but she also wanted space to process what she had seen, what she had felt. Later that morning, they ran into Lily in the hotel lobby. She looked exhausted, holding a cup of coffee, her hair slightly messy, her shoulders rounded with fatigue. But her eyes were gentle, searching. "I was hoping I'd see you," Lily said quietly to Sarah. "Why?" Sarah asked, curious. She had no reason to trust the connection. Yet she felt drawn to hear what Lily had to say because I think we both felt something last night. Lily said, her voice soft, "And I don't want it to sit between us in silence." Sarah considered her carefully. Lily wasn't arrogant. She wasn't trying to come between her and Ethan. She seemed aware of her place and her boundaries. "I don't think you crossed a line," Sarah said, her voice firm but calm. "I didn't want to," Lily replied, "and I won't. I promise." For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other, acknowledging an unspoken understanding. They were connected by the fragility of the night before, by the realization that life sometimes put them in complicated spaces without warning, and they could either let that complicate things further, or they could honor what was important. When Ethan joined them, the shift was immediate. He noticed a subtle difference in Sarah's posture, a quiet strength in her gaze, and a polite but firm composure in Lily. Nothing had been spoken, yet everything had changed. He understood in that moment that attraction was inevitable and sometimes uncontrollable, but trust and love were deliberate. They required attention, care, and choice. The flight home was silent at first. Sarah rested her head against the window, the city shrinking beneath them. Ethan stared at her reflection, seeing the woman who had stood by him through everything, the one who had chosen him, the one who deserved his focus and loyalty. He reached for her hand, slowly, almost tentatively. This time she didn't pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. She needed him to show commitment, not just words. She needed him to act, to prove that he valued what they had more than the distraction that had threatened it. Ethan realized, as the plane lifted into the sky, that the test wasn't about who he noticed or who he was curious about. The test was about who he was willing to protect, to fight for, to prioritize. He knew that love wasn't easy, and sometimes the heart strayed without intent. But choosing love, choosing commitment, required conscious effort. Sarah closed her eyes and let the hum of the plane fill the silence. She felt the tension in her body ease slightly, but remained cautious. She knew they had work to do. The look he had given Lily, the subtle attraction, wasn't a betrayal yet, but it had opened a window she didn't know she needed to close. Ethan's hand stayed near hers. Not touching, not demanding, just present. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The gesture itself was a promise, small but significant. He was aware. He had noticed, and he was ready to act before the silence between them grew too wide. In the days that followed, the memory of that dinner lingered. Both Sarah and Ethan reflected on it in their own ways. Sarah noticed how easily a look could shift emotions, how quickly doubt could creep into a marriage. Ethan recognized how dangerous moments of inattention could be, and how important it was to reaffirm connection before distance became permanent. Lily faded from immediate thought, but remained a subtle reminder. She was a catalyst, someone who had shown Ethan a reflection of distraction and desire. But she was not the problem. The problem had always been in the unnoticed spaces between Sarah and Ethan. In the quiet habits that had allowed attention to drift, Ethan began to consciously pay attention, to listen to Sarah more, to notice her gestures, to prioritize moments together without distraction. Small gestures became important. A touch on the arm, a shared smile, an unexpected compliment. He realized that love required presence, not just intention. Sarah, meanwhile, learned to trust her instincts while also giving room for growth. She understood that attraction could appear unexpectedly, but that commitment was deliberate. She needed to see Ethan choose her consistently, not just through words but through actions. By the time they landed in Toronto, both felt the weight of the experience, but also the potential for renewal. The silence in the hotel room had been heavy, but it had been necessary. It had allowed space to recognize truth without anger, to understand the fragility of attention, and to see clearly what mattered. The evening traffic on the drive home gave them both a chance to reflect. Sarah rested her hand lightly on the console, and Ethan reached over, placing his hand over hers, tentative but steady. She looked at him, eyes searching for sincerity. He gave a small nod, a silent promise to be present, to be aware, to prioritize the bond they had built over the distractions life inevitably brought. Sometimes, Ethan realized attraction didn't need to be fought at, needed awareness. And love didn't need to be proven in grand gestures, it needed consistent, conscious choices. As the skyline of Toronto appeared, Sarah and Ethan shared a quiet understanding. They had been tested, subtly but surely. And the challenge was clear. They had to nurture the love they had, protect it from careless distractions, and remain connected through attention, care, and intentional acts of devotion. The evening light reflected softly off the car windows. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the small but significant moments unfolding within one couple's life. Inside, Ethan squeezed Sarah's hand gently, and this time she returned the gesture. A quiet acknowledgement of trust, understanding, and the conscious choice to fight for what mattered most. And in that shared silence, with hands entwined and hearts cautiously open, both understood. Love wasn't easy, but it was theirs to protect that choice, made in the quiet spaces between words and glances, was more powerful than any fleeting attraction ever could be.